What is a narcissist? Now, this is one of the most important topics, I believe, nowadays that people need to understand in order to avoid the pain and devastation that will inevitably result from not knowing what you're dealing with or how to deal with it. In this video, I'm going to tell you about what is a narcissist as that term is used on this channel. Narcissist is a keyword. In fact, it's the #1 keyword that helps people find life-saving information. The internet is an amazing thing. So much information is available out there, but if you don't have the exact keywords to find what you're looking for, it's really hard to find information. That's why this word narcissist is so useful. I use the term narcissist on this channel as an umbrella term that encompasses certain behavioral patterns. Now, the term narcissist comes from an actual psychological diagnosis from the American psychiatry book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychology. Now, I'm not concerned with that book because I'm not a licensed therapist. I've read the definition of the narcissistic personality disorder in that book, and what I found is that it really doesn't describe how this shows up in real life, how these people show up. It also doesn't take into account that there are both overt and covert forms of these kinds of abusers. So we're never diagnosing anybody on this channel, and of course if you're not a licensed psychotherapist, you're also not diagnosing people. However, one of the very most important parts of the healing journey in the very early stages is being able to put a label on the abuse and the abuser, whatever label you're comfortable with. If you like the term narcissist and you feel like that most fits, that's fine. There are other terminologies that you might prefer to use. So you can think of the DSM as the official language of psychology. Imagine it were a country, that would be the official language, because basically that's the paradigm around which the entire medical field works and sees this phenomenon. Now, I don't live in that paradigm, I don't work in that paradigm, so the analogy would be that what I speak is more of an indigenous language in that country. It's not recognized as an official language of the country, however, it's a language of the people. It's the language that people understand. The way I see it is that narcissists have a disorder of the conscience. The conscience is really what makes us human. It's what gives us a sense of guilt when we do something wrong and hurtful. It's what allows us to know what's right and what's wrong. We just get that feeling inside if it's not okay. Our conscience also allows us to feel empathy. It allows us to create healthy emotional attachments with other human beings. Narcissists and other people like them have a disorder of that conscience. So their empathy doesn't work right. They don't feel a sense of guilt. If they do, it might be very fleeting. They might have moments of lucidity, but then it's gone again. They're right back into their manipulation games. They know the difference between right and wrong, but they choose to do wrong anyways because they don't feel the weight of the guilt. A narcissist is one type of toxic people. There are many more different types of toxic people. So one of the first tips I want to give you is not to worry if the person has narcissistic personality disorder or a personality disorder, if it's full-blown, if they just have traits. That doesn't matter because you're not a licensed psychotherapist needing to diagnose a person. What you need to do is to be able to label abusive and manipulative behavior and the person who's doing those behaviors in order to take the proper measures to protect yourself and then to work on healing yourself after the inevitable harm of a relationship like that. The most important thing is to look at the behavioral patterns of self-absorbed manipulation. This is what we call narcissistic abuse. The three main signs of narcissistic abuse are, #1, the love bombing and devaluation cycle. That's the abuse cycle. The love bombing doesn't look like abuse, and I'm going to link a video about that, why it's so dangerous, up here in the corner if you want to check that out. People sometimes say, oh, you know, they're nice sometimes and then they're abusive. But the whole cycle is actually abuse, because the love bombing is fake. It's superficial, it's shallow, it's not real, it's a seduction. It's meant to confuse you. That's why people don't realize or can't accept who they're dealing with. This intermittent reinforcement of love bombing and devaluation, along with an isolation from other people and other perspectives, and a feeling that there's no way out, is what locks you in the trauma bond, the Stockholm Syndrome. I'm going to put that link up here if you haven't seen a video I did 3 years ago on the Stockholm Syndrome. I also did a recent podcast episode on the differences and similarities between the cognitive dissonance and the trauma bond. So check out the Inner Integration podcast for that information. The second most prominent sign of narcissistic abuse is what we call DARVO. That's an acronym that stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse, Victim, and Offender. What does that mean? That means blame shifting. That means you call them out, you set a boundary about something that happened, and they turn it around on you. Somehow they make it your fault. They blame you for their own actions, denying any wrongdoing whatsoever. If you're not familiar with the term DARVO, check out the link up here for that video that I did last year. And the third most prominent sign of narcissistic abuse is zero self-responsibility. That person is unable to accept self-responsibility for the actions that they take, for the hurtful things that they do. So when you see those three signs, that's when you know without a doubt you are dealing with narcissistic abuse. No matter what label you want to put on that person, those behavioral patterns are narcissistic abuse. Why does that matter? Because you know that if you're dealing with someone who does that, you are in a relationship of inevitable harm. Harm will inevitably come to you when you're dealing with someone with no self-responsibility, who always turns things back around on you, and who's putting you into that abuse cycle, manipulating you between love bombing and devaluation. Now, it's normal to want to correctly label the person that you're dealing with. And I think that's the main challenge for a lot of survivors and victims, is because that psychology book, again, was created by the official language of that medical institution. That book was written and is rewritten every so many years in order to match the diagnosis with a drug. So in essence, the American Psychiatry Institution is supporting Big Pharma in that they want a diagnosis for every drug. There's drug or several drugs to recommend for every diagnosis. So that doesn't really apply to real life. There's clearly other agendas behind there. And that's not something that you need to be able to master unless you want to become a licensed psychotherapist or psychiatrist. The bottom line is, when you see those behavioral patterns that I mentioned and you're questioning if this person is a narcissist or another form of abuser, you've just got to ask yourself one question. Okay, instead of getting so worried about what the exact label is, when you see the behaviors, you got to ask yourself, is this really how I want to live? So what do you do if you notice those behavioral patterns of narcissistic abuse of a person in your life? That could be your intimate partner, it could be one of your friends, it could be someone in your social circle, someone at work, a colleague, a boss, a coworker, an employee, a client even that you're working with, or it could be someone in your family. Number one, get the book Psychopath Free by Jackson Mackenzie. You'll find that on Amazon.com. That book explains to you all the patterns of narcissistic abuse, exactly from A to Z, how your relationship is going to go, all the things that you're experiencing. It's going to help you understand everything that you're going through. One of the most wonderful things that he mentions in that book too is how similar those cluster B personality disorders are, how not to get hung up on trying to figure out exactly which one they have or which ones they have if they have more than one of those personality disorders, and do not worry if they have a full-blown personality disorder. The point is, you see the behavioral patterns of abuse. Number two, apply the 3-strike rule when you're dealing with someone who's showing the signs of DARVO, the blame shifting, and accepting no responsibility. So if you didn't see that real quick video that I did about a year or two ago on the 3-strike rule, I'm going to link that up here. And sometimes keep in mind, some behaviors are one and done. Some people don't deserve a second chance to hurt you again because what they did the first time was enough for you to set that boundary and go no contact with them. Number 3 is set boundaries ASAP. That usually means going no contact. I have a whole playlist on no contact if you want information on that. If you can't go no contact yet, or you're not ready to fully go no contact, that's when you want to cut way back on contact and start setting more and more boundaries with that person. And as soon as you can, cut your losses and end those relationships, no matter how that relationship shows up in your life, romantic, friendship, social, work, family members, because there is going to be inevitable harm and inevitable loss when you're dealing with people like that. Don't hang around hoping that they're going to pay you back, things are going to even out. You're always going to have losses. The question is, how soon are you going to cut your losses before you keep investing in that person and that relationship and losing even more than you already have? Number 4, start healing as soon as possible so you don't have to go through it again. Understand, if you have been in a relationship with someone like this, you have a high risk factor for getting into another relationship like that if you don't deal with the inner issues. The abuse was not your fault. It was never your fault. And it is your responsibility now to work on self-healing so you can get better and avoid people like that in the future. If you're just getting started on your healing journey, you can opt in on my website with your name and email to get a quick start guide, a free ebook to recovery after narcissistic abuse that will help you put into place the 3 most important first steps in that process. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, give it a like, leave a comment below to let me know. Be sure to click that little bell next to the subscribe button if you want to get notifications when I put out a new video. YouTube doesn't notify you if you don't click that bell. If you have an encouraging comment, some motivation, some inspiration, something that you want to leave for people who are just finding out about this keyword narcissist, leave that comment below to help other people who are reading through those comments. People often say how much value they get out of reading the comments, not just the video content, but the things that you guys contribute to this conversation. And I want to thank every one of you who contributes something positive to that. I'm sending you a big hug.